I've always been someone who likes routine. I'm the type of person who finds comfort in the predictable, especially when it comes to the simple tasks of life. Mowing the lawn, for instance, has always been an act of calm for me. But this year was different. The weather was anything but predictable, with an unusual mix of rain and warmth making it necessary to mow earlier than usual. The unpredictability of spring's weather had me out on the grass cutting it before I had planned to, even though last year, this same time, a blizzard had thrown everything off balance. It seemed like a small sacrifice compared to dealing with snow again. After the madness of tax season at work, all I wanted was to enjoy a quiet moment outside. The unpredictable weather at the end of spring had me mowing the lawn earlier than usual this month, especially with the unexpected rain and warmth. Last year, we had a blizzard around this time, so mowing early seemed like a small price to pay to avoid snow. Now that tax season was over, I was just happy to be outside. My backyard slopes down to a stream and woods, and the basement is exposed in the back due to the leveled front yard. This setup makes it convenient for me to store lawn equipment in the basement. After mowing, my grass allergies had me eager to shower. As I reached the top of the stairs, I overheard my wife, Ashley, talking to her friend, Nicole. It wasn't unusual for them to chat, but what I heard made me stop in my tracks before opening the door. I'm Robert Crane, but most people call me Bob. Back in college, I earned the nickname Hogan, after the actor from Hogan's Heroes. I graduated with an accounting degree, passed my CPA exam quickly, and now manage a team specializing in forensic analysis for a large Philadelphia firm. My work even took me to consult with the FBI. I met Ashley in our junior year. She was studying political science and business, planning on going to law school. She had this striking presence, tall, slender, and with long strawberry blonde hair that drew me in immediately. We didn't end up in the same classes, but after about a month of getting up the courage, I finally talked to her. We started chatting, and before long I asked her out for coffee after class. We spent the next 2 years of college together, hardly ever apart. Our parents weren't thrilled at first, but when we moved in together during senior year, they saw how serious we were and eventually accepted it. After graduation, I landed a great job at a top public accounting firm in Philly, and Ashley was accepted into Penn's law school. We decided to stay in our student apartment while I worked on my MBA, which my company covered. My commute was via SEPTA, so I didn't need a car, saving money. 3 years later, after Ashley graduated, I proposed during her celebration dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. We were married 6 months after that. Ashley began working as a deputy district attorney in Bucks County, so we bought a house in Doylestown where the courthouse was and the regional rail line ended. This made it easy for me to take the train to work every day, even though the commute was long, 80 minutes one way. It was still better than dealing with Philly traffic. The house was a great starter home. It had 3 bedrooms, one for an office, where I could work from home occasionally, and another for Ashley's legal work. The third was our master bedroom. The location was also convenient because it was close to her parents' house, which she said would be helpful when we had kids. Ashley and I had talked about having children since college, but we agreed to wait until she was more settled in her career. Now that we were both ready, we decided to stop her birth control and start trying for a baby. I couldn't have been happier. But just as I was about to go inside, I overheard a conversation that made my world come crashing down. Ashley was telling Nicole that she was ending her affair with Paul Evans, her boss at the DA's office. Paul was a widower in his 40s, a political figure with big ambitions. I had no idea about the affair, but as Ashley continued, it became clear how deeply involved she had been with Paul, using him for his political influence and power. The shock of hearing this, especially as Ashley expressed her commitment to me and our plans for a family, left me frozen in place. It hit me hard to realize how much I had been kept in the dark about her actions. The conversation made me question everything, from the trust in our relationship to the reality of what I thought we had. I was on the edge, fighting the urge to confront Ashley immediately, to scream, or to destroy everything in sight. But my body felt frozen, unable to move while my mind raced, processing what I had overheard. Ashley had been having an affair, but she claimed she was ending it to focus on our family and the baby. It was almost too much to bear, the betrayal tearing at me, yet I knew I had to step back and think clearly before acting. Trying to act normal, I made a loud noise on the stairs as though I was coming up. When I entered the kitchen, Ashley and her friend Nicole were sitting at the table with their tea. I forced myself to appear unaffected, wiping my tears and telling Ashley it was just allergies. She seemed concerned, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the turmoil inside me. I simply headed upstairs, needing time to process everything. The next morning, I left early, claiming I had an early meeting. The night before, I had used my allergies as an excuse to retreat to bed early, overwhelmed with the emotions I couldn't control. As I rode the train into work, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation I had overheard. Ashley had admitted to the affair, but reassured me she was ending it for good. She said she wanted to focus on our future, on the baby we were planning. Some might say I should be relieved. After all, she claimed she was coming back to me, to be a good wife and mother. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it could happen again once the kids were older, or if things got difficult between us. Would she have another just a fling affair? And if so, what would that mean for us? The thought of divorce crossed my mind. If Ashley did this again, it would tear our family apart. She'd likely get custody of the kids, and I'd be left paying hefty child support and alimony. As a CPA, I knew how this would play out. The financial burden would be devastating, and my career would be impacted. It was hard to imagine getting a new job with poor credit. The idea of leaving and starting fresh sounded appealing at first, but I realized that it wasn't practical. We couldn't afford to sell the house easily, and if we didn't, foreclosure would destroy both of our credit scores. So, I knew I had to wait for solid proof before making any decisions. I needed something I could use to confront her, something concrete that would make it clear I wasn't just imagining things. 3 days passed, and I was still struggling to find any hard evidence. I had gone through Ashley's personal laptop, checking for anything suspicious. There were no hidden emails, no secret accounts, no receipts, no provocative lingerie tucked away. Everything seemed clean, almost too clean. It didn't add up. Then, Ashley called me at work, casually mentioning that we were invited to a party at Paul Evans' house on Friday night. I assumed it was an event for his Senate campaign, but part of me felt like it was just another opportunity for her to spend time with him. Despite my desire to confront him about what I'd heard, I knew it would be pointless without proof. When we arrived at Paul's house on Friday evening, I was struck by the grandeur of it. His large home near Washington Crossing sat on a small horse farm, and the backyard had been transformed with a tent for the event. Paul stood at the head of the receiving line, acting as if he were royalty. As a widower, he didn't have a wife to host, so his daughter, young, about 21, helped him greet guests. As we approached, Paul greeted Ashley warmly with a broad smile. "Ashley, you made it! How wonderful!" He kissed her on the cheek, then turned to me. "Robert, great to see you again. I'd be lost without your wife, but I hear you'll need to let her go soon as you start expanding the family." He laughed at his own joke. "Just make sure to return her to me when you're done. No hard feelings." His comment was dripping with smugness, and Ashley blushed slightly, but I could tell it wasn't out of modesty. I was boiling inside, barely able to hold back. I managed to keep my composure, replying in a neutral tone, "I'm not sure what the future holds." My voice was flat, devoid of warmth, much like how I would present audit results. Professional but detached. Paul's face went pale for a split second, and Ashley nudged me, whispering about how rude I was being. But I didn't care. I had seen through him, and his reaction told me everything I needed to know. He knew I was onto him, and I had finally started to see the full extent of what had been going on. He quickly moved on to greet the next guests, leaving us with his daughter, but I could tell the tension was palpable. My mind was spinning with what I'd learned in that brief interaction, but I held my ground. I wasn't ready to confront Ashley yet. I still needed more to go on. But I knew the pieces were finally falling into place. Despite my simmering anger, I couldn't help but notice Barbara Evans. She was striking, with dark red hair and a radiant smile that reminded me of a young Maureen O'Hara. While Ashley had a graceful ballerina look, Barbara was the picture of a swimsuit model, perfect skin, a healthy figure, and a presence that would make any photographer swoon. She was every bit the beauty expected of a political family's daughter. Paul Evans had cultivated the image of the ideal politician, the wise statesman with a saintly deceased wife and a perfect daughter. His wife's death from cancer only solidified his image, while Barbara seemed to fit the role of the perfect political princess, smart, beautiful, and poised for success. She was a senior at Penn, involved in gymnastics and cheerleading, and planning to audition for the Eagles cheerleading squad. The Evans family was precisely the kind of people the media loved. Barbara greeted me with unexpected enthusiasm, her embrace lingering longer than I'd anticipated. I was stunned, trying to act polite, but my thoughts raced. First, she hadn't acknowledged Ashley at all. Second, what was she talking about with all these parties? As Ashley stepped in to greet Barbara, I was left with more questions than answers. After I grabbed a drink for Ashley, I couldn't hold it in anymore and asked about the parties Barbara mentioned. Ashley casually dismissed it, explaining that Paul often held team meetings at his house under the guise of work. Apparently, Barbara had been around when these meetings took place, but Ashley reassured me there was nothing more to it. I wasn't so sure. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that Paul was using his home for more than just business meetings. It was convenient, no hotel rooms, no records, just a perfect cover. The affair was happening under my nose. I asked if Barbara attended these meetings, but Ashley waved it off, insisting Barbara was just joking. We moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. For the next hour, Ashley stayed close, and we mingled with her coworkers. Some of them mentioned our plans to start a family, which felt a little too familiar. Why did everyone know about it? It seemed odd that so many people were in the loop. An hour later, Paul Evans gathered everyone's attention for a campaign announcement. His daughter stood beside him, smiling. It was clearly a big moment, and local press was already documenting the event. Despite the political excitement, I couldn't focus on anything but the gnawing suspicion growing inside me. The party continued, but I was disconnected. My mind raced, trying to piece together the clues. About 90 minutes later, Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, came over to say that Paul wanted to meet with his staff. Margaret was the backbone of the office, tough, respected, and reliable. She'd been married for decades to a man who'd supported her career, and their relationship always seemed like a model of loyalty and stability. I admired them both. Margaret apologized for taking Ashley away, explaining that Paul wanted to discuss office organization after his campaign speech. The two of them left, and I was left alone. I stepped away from the remaining guests and made my way to the far side of the large pool. A wicker swing chair, partially in the shadows, offered a quiet corner where I could collect my thoughts. It was a secluded spot, visible enough to be noticed, but hidden enough to give me some peace. Within minutes, I wasn't alone anymore. A soft voice broke the silence. "So, this is where you're hiding." I glanced up, surprised to see Barbara Evans slipping into the wicker swing beside me. She positioned herself slightly to face me, without me having to say anything. Her black dress clung to her figure, subtly highlighting her toned legs and body, which made her look both alluring and innocent. The fact that I was noticing this so closely only underscored the state of my mind. Distracted, confused, and overwhelmed by everything I was trying to process. Barbara seemed to sense my unease. She commented that I seemed like I was carrying a heavy burden. I didn't want to talk about my personal issues, especially with the daughter of my wife's lover, no matter how attractive she was. I gave a half-hearted excuse about work, mentioning the audits at the office, hoping it would steer the conversation away. But Barbara, surprisingly, leaned in with genuine curiosity, telling me that she'd just finished an accounting course where they discussed forensic accounting. She said she found it fascinating, how forensic accountants sift through mountains of information to find hidden patterns, almost like detectives. That caught me off guard, especially considering everything else going on in my mind. I asked her if she was serious, not quite believing that someone so young would be into such a specific field. Barbara explained that it wasn't glamorous, but it was like solving a puzzle, one where people try to hide the pieces. But the truth eventually comes to light. I agreed with her, but didn't expect her to have such an in-depth understanding of the subject. As she went into more detail, I found myself surprisingly impressed. I had interns who couldn't articulate these concepts as well. For a moment, I pushed my anger and frustration aside, focusing on her words, and allowed myself to slip into a more professional mindset, like a mentor. It felt like a small escape from the emotional turmoil I was drowning in. When I complimented her on her understanding of the subject, Barbara blushed slightly, and for a second, the glamorous image of her faded, revealing a young woman who was genuinely pleased by the praise. Barbara then shared that she had been thinking about joining the FBI after graduation, though her father, Paul Evans, wanted her to pursue a career in law, either as a prosecutor or at one of his friends' law firms. I encouraged her to follow her own path, not just her father's. Though deep down, part of me felt a bit of satisfaction at the thought of disrupting Paul's carefully crafted plans. I also mentioned that I'd worked with the FBI on cases where criminal activity had been uncovered through audits, and they were always professional. Before Barbara could respond, Ashley emerged from the shadows, lightheartedly asking where I had been hiding. She playfully questioned if I was up to any mischief, Barbara, without missing a beat, smiled and explained that we were just talking about my job and how she had recently studied accounting in school. Ashley, clearly proud of me, shared a story about how I'd once uncovered an employee embezzling funds. She told Barbara that I had managed to trace the employee's actions to transfers made during a time when the boss was away, and how, even though most people would have stopped there, I dug deeper and practically did the DA's job for them. Her pride in my work caught me off guard, considering the state of our relationship. How could she be so loving and supportive of me while carrying on a 6-month affair with Paul? Ashley must have noticed the confusion in my eyes because she asked what was wrong. I just brushed it off, claiming I was thinking about a problem. She immediately moved on, telling me excitedly that she'd been offered an administrative role before going on maternity leave, which would allow her to work closely with Margaret. For a brief moment, I felt relieved at the thought of her moving away from Paul. But that relief was short-lived. Ashley continued to talk about the role, mentioning that she'd need to travel occasionally to deliver sensitive documents to Paul during his campaign. While she insisted she wouldn't be involved in the campaign, she seemed to relish the idea of seeing the behind-the-scenes action. My heart sank. If she did get pregnant, how could I be sure the child was mine? Paul and I looked so alike. It would be nearly impossible to tell without a DNA test. The anger that had been simmering inside me started to boil over, but I forced myself to remain calm. This wasn't the moment to lose control. As Barbara and Ashley continued to chat about her new role, I slipped away into my thoughts. I needed to come up with a plan, a way to deal with Paul's influence and everything that had been building up. I couldn't just let this slide, but I had no idea where to start. The weight of the situation was suffocating, but I knew I had to act. 2 days later, I had my answer. My assistant interrupted my thoughts, announcing that my 4 o'clock appointment had arrived. A small glimmer of hope sparked within me. Maybe this was the break I needed. I checked my Outlook calendar and saw that I didn't have any appointments scheduled for the afternoon. But before I could even process that, Barbara Evans walked into my office. Her long, dark red hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she was wearing a light sundress that clung to her legs in all the right ways, accentuating her figure. The dress was modest in the front, with no cleavage showing, but the fabric hugged her body suggestively. It was the kind of look that was both alluring and innocent, and I found myself speechless as I watched her walk in. She greeted me, saying she had told Mary we were meeting to talk about her career and how Ashley worked for her father. I stood up politely, offered her a seat, and told her I was just working on some reports. After we exchanged pleasantries, I asked what she wanted to discuss. Barbara's usual cheerfulness quickly faded as she mentioned she knew about the affair between her father and my wife. Her directness took me by surprise. She went on to explain that she had discovered the affair a few months ago when she came home early from a lunch with a friend. She wasn't expecting to find anything out of the ordinary, but instead, she found her dad and Ashley in a compromising situation in the hot tub at their house. She'd taken photos, even capturing images of them running back into the house without clothes, in the snow. She also had video footage from the security system her father had installed at the house. Barbara handed me an envelope with the photos and a thumb drive containing the video footage, offering me everything I needed for the divorce and to bring her father down. I was taken aback by her gesture and immediately asked why she was doing this. Her answer was simple. She hated her father more than I ever could. Her eyes darkened with anger as she explained her background. She told me how her father had met her mother when she was a college student, and he was a rookie lawyer in Philadelphia. Her mother had come to the U.S. from Ireland to escape the violence of the Troubles, having lost her wealthy family in Londonderry. Her mother had been involved in an abusive relationship before meeting Barbara's father. He had been assigned to her case after her mother had ended up in the hospital after a beating, and he sent the abuser to jail. Less than a year later, they were married. Barbara went on to explain how her father had always been driven by ambition. He got a beautiful, exotic woman to marry, and her mother found in him a strong man who could protect her from the abusive men of her past. But as Barbara grew up, she began to realize that she wasn't her father's daughter so much as she was a tool for his political ambitions. She was pushed into gymnastics, which her father believed would elevate his status if she made it to the Olympics. When that didn't work out, he pushed her into cheerleading, the quintessential all-American girl. Barbara confessed that by the time she was 16, she realized she was nothing more than a pawn in his larger plan. Her mother had figured it out too, but being a staunch Catholic, she couldn't bring herself to divorce her husband, despite knowing he had been unfaithful since the beginning of their marriage. Barbara reflected on how her mother had likely undermined her cancer treatments, either intentionally or subconsciously, out of a desire to escape her life. She told me how, after her mother passed away, her father kept his infidelities hidden until she went off to college. That was when the meetings at their house began, under the guise of business or charity work. Barbara knew he was having affairs with other women, some of whom were involved in the same charity work as he was. One of these women even believed she was in love with him and planned to leave her husband for him. I asked if Ashley believed she was in love with her father, but Barbara shook her head. She didn't think that was the case at all. To her, Ashley was drawn to the power dynamic. Barbara had overheard her talking to her father about a meeting with a senator and how excited she was when she got back to Doylestown. It was clear that Ashley wasn't interested in a real relationship. She was in it for the thrill of being with someone powerful. Barbara's words were a revelation, and it was clear that she was offering me this information not out of spite, but because she felt a deep sense of injustice and wanted to take her father down. She had grown up in a household full of manipulation and deceit, and now she was determined to stop it from affecting anyone else, even if it meant helping someone who was going through the same turmoil. In the end, Barbara's feelings of betrayal were too deep to ignore, and I understood that she wasn't just handing me this evidence for my own sake. She wanted me to expose her father for the man he truly was. Her comment hit hard, and I couldn't help but wince. I recalled that night vividly, coming home to a wife full of passion, a night that had felt so deeply connected. Now that memory felt off, tainted by the realization that she might have had someone else in her mind. Barbara's goals were clear. She wanted to help me leave my unfaithful wife and destroy her father's political career. She was determined, so much so that she'd considered taking the scandal public, but feared the backlash due to her father's powerful connections. Still, she was confident that if we worked together, we could make them pay. I asked her about her finances, and she explained that her mother had left her a trust fund, enough to cover her schooling and then some. She could even pursue an MBA without worrying about money. Then, I asked why her mom didn't just leave her father for Ireland, where he couldn't control her. Barbara hesitated before revealing her mother's strict upbringing, raised in a Catholic environment where divorce was unthinkable. In the end, Barbara believed her mother's death wasn't just a tragic choice, but more of a loss of will to live, driven by her unyielding faith. Barbara was sincere. It was clear her mission to ruin her father's career was no bluff. She was deeply committed, and there was no sign of manipulation. If Ashley and Paul were to strike at me, it would be through the courts, not through covert schemes. This kind of underhandedness seemed to be the last resort of someone as desperate as I was. A plan began to take shape. I'd need Barbara's help with a few things, and her determination would show me just how far she was willing to go. I agreed to work with her, setting one condition. I didn't want to use the photos of my wife's affair or drag her father into the divorce. I had no interest in becoming the disgraced husband in a public scandal. Instead, I wanted to quietly dismantle her father's influence, leaving me to handle my divorce in peace. Barbara was surprised by my approach, but quickly shifted to a calculating smile. She was in. I laid out my strategy. I needed access to her father's financial records, both personal and related to his campaign. I'd take a page from history. Capone was taken down through tax evasion, and I was confident I could find something in his files. If not, I had other ways to make evidence. Barbara wasted no time. Over the next few days, she set up a keylogger on both her father's laptop and desktop, then backed up all his data. She also rigged the security system to upload footage to a cloud server overseas. Conveniently, her father had installed cameras throughout his house. As for me, I didn't feel the need to spy on Ashley. I already had all the proof I needed, but I did set up a GPS tracker on her car, one of those for parents keeping an eye on their kids. It could track her whereabouts more precisely, just in case. The next day, I pretended to hurt myself to avoid intimacy with Ashley. I never thought I'd need an excuse for this, but after discovering Paul's infidelities, I couldn't take any more risks. I scheduled an appointment for STD tests, though nothing showed up at first. Some things, like HIV, can take months to detect. Ashley left for a business trip to Pittsburgh, eager to meet with Paul. She was excited, especially since I had kept her waiting. Some might have done something petty, but I was too emotionally torn. I couldn't bring myself to trust her again, and even the thought of being close to her felt unbearable. By Thursday morning, she was packed and ready. I watched her as she dropped her bag by the door, then came up behind me. She wrapped her arms around me, whispering that she'd be back Sunday and we'd get started on trying for a baby. Her words hit me, mixing nostalgia and pain. I forced a smile, assuring her I'd keep icing my injury so I'd be ready when she got back. She sighed, wishing she didn't have to leave. "You could always tell Evans something came up," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She caught the hint in my voice. "What's your deal with Paul?" she asked, sounding taken aback. I shrugged, keeping my cool. "Honestly, I just don't trust guys like him," I replied. "They think they're untouchable. Like that mayor in South Carolina who got caught embezzling and sleeping around. He was all powerful until he wasn't. Now he's in federal prison, and everyone involved is paying the price. Evans gives me the same vibe. He's not going to stay on top for long, and when his bubble bursts, everyone around him will get caught in the fallout." Ashley was taken aback by my accusation about Paul. While I had often expressed my distrust of shady figures, I had never connected Paul to any of them. Maybe I shouldn't have spoken up, but I couldn't help it. It felt good to vent. Despite the end of our marriage, I still felt it was my responsibility to warn her. Even though trust was gone, I still cared for her. She quickly dismissed my claims, clearly upset. Her response was defensive, and her insistence that Paul was a good man didn't carry the conviction it once might have. Just then, the sound of a car horn interrupted us. Paul had arrived. Ashley's frustration was palpable. She shot me an irritated look, but it softened quickly, replaced by an expression that seemed to blend regret and fear. After a brief exchange, she mentioned that she would be gone for the next 4 days and promised we'd talk when she returned. She kissed me passionately before walking out, whispering that she loved me. I returned her words, but knew things were different now. I left for the city soon after, heading to a meeting with Barbara and the FBI. We had gathered enough evidence to move forward with the investigation. At Barbara's apartment, we pored over the documents she had taken from her father's computer. We quickly realized that Paul's methods of embezzlement were clever, but not foolproof. He had hidden about $2 million in an offshore account, but the records didn't clarify whether the funds were still there. Most of the money had come from small donors who wouldn't typically attract IRS scrutiny. But what stood out was that many of these donors were from out of state, which was odd for a county DA's campaign. Further investigation revealed that some of these donors were tied to cases where charges were mysteriously dropped or plea deals were unusually lenient. Barbara's discovery was even more shocking. She uncovered that Paul had fathered 2 children outside of his marriage, one with a staff member 3 years before his wife's death, and the other with an 18-year-old volunteer shortly after his wife passed away. To support these women and their children, Paul had funneled $2,000 a month to each, disguised as payments for poll research consultants, all through campaign funds. Barbara was furious, and her anger nearly destroyed her apartment. By the time Ashley and Paul had left, Barbara and I had thoroughly reviewed all the documents. While we still had a few lingering questions, we had enough to move forward. I documented everything and arranged a meeting with Gary, a senior FBI agent I had worked with in the past. Barbara's story for Gary was that after completing a forensic accounting class, she had become curious about real-world financial records. She decided to review her father's files and, when she found discrepancies, reached out to me for help. Gary, a seasoned agent, didn't question our version of events. He knew he had a goldmine of a case, a corrupt DA running for Senate. This could make his career. After the meeting, Barbara and I parted ways. She headed back to her apartment for class, while I walked to 30th Street Station to catch my train home. I considered leaving before Ashley returned, but Gary had assured me that the case would move quickly. He promised to subpoena Paul's records by Wednesday, and once the investigation became public, Paul's influence would start to erode as people turned on him. While on the train, Ashley called. She told me she wouldn't be back to her room until late because of a dinner with Paul. I suspected she had no intention of returning to her room at all. When she noticed I was distracted, I downplayed it, telling her I'd just had a meeting with the FBI and couldn't share details yet. She seemed concerned and pointed out that I sounded affected by the situation. I explained that the case was going to be a mess and would likely make national headlines when it broke. She pressed for more details, but I kept it vague, mentioning corruption, bribes, money laundering, scandals, and even a few children involved. Ashley was curious and asked if the case involved someone she knew, but I refused to say more. I claimed that revealing too much would upset the FBI. She teased me about being no fun, assuring me that my secret was safe with her before hanging up. The investigation was on track, and I knew that in the next few days, everything would begin to unfold. When I got home, The full weight of my situation hit me like a ton of bricks. My marriage was over. 10 years of shared history, love, and companionship now gone? I never imagined I'd find myself single again. Yet here I was. I sank into the couch, watching the sun set outside, feeling like I was watching my life slip through my fingers. Hours passed in stillness, the fading light a mirror of my inner emptiness. By Saturday afternoon, I finally snapped out of my funk. I knew I'd allowed myself enough time to wallow, but I couldn't stay stuck forever. As I mowed the lawn, a BMW convertible rolled into the driveway. I stopped the mower, eyes fixed on Barbara as she stepped out of the car. The first thing I noticed were her long legs, toned and pale, swinging out from the driver's seat. Her sandals with thin cords wrapped up her calves gave off an ancient Greek vibe. As she stood, her legs flexed, showcasing the strength and grace of her body. She wore a white dress that hugged her figure like a toga, stopping just above mid-thigh with delicate lace trimming that teased glimpses of her upper thighs. The sheer, silky material clung to her form, revealing a top underneath. Her bare arms, dotted with freckles, were exposed, and the dress draped over one shoulder, leaving the other completely bare. Her red hair cascaded in waves down her back, and it was her eyes, gray-green and full of depth, that caught me the most, followed by her soft, knowing smile. I shut off the mower and greeted her, somewhat distracted by the unexpected arrival. Barbara wasted no time with pleasantries, commenting on my better-than-expected condition, teasing that she'd expected to find me in a darker state. I chuckled, remembering how low I had felt the night before. I explained I'd met with a lawyer earlier in the week, and while the divorce paperwork would be ready soon, I had planned a business trip to Austin on Tuesday. It would keep me occupied for a few weeks. As much as I hated to admit it, staying away from home seemed like the only escape, especially as the fallout of my marriage loomed. Barbara gave me a knowing look, understanding that my departure would also cast a shadow on her, as the daughter of the man who had been part of the unraveling. She smiled at my forward planning, offering praise in a way that felt almost too familiar. Her next words surprised me as she outlined her own plans. She wanted to help me wrap up the work at home, then spend time together at her place. Her suggestion was direct and enthusiastic. The idea of relaxing with her, especially knowing how stunning she looked, was hard to resist. She even promised a swimsuit that she knew I would love. Her upbeat energy was infectious, reminding me of how much I needed a distraction. I hesitated for a moment, still processing the end of my marriage. Barbara quickly countered my concerns, suggesting I needed to let off steam before I reached my breaking point. She reminded me that what was good for the goose was good for the gander, her playful tone breaking through my resistance. I couldn't help but laugh at her boldness. Then, as if scripted by fate, we ran into Nicole. After finishing up the yard work, I freshened up, and Barbara and I went out for a late lunch at a nearby restaurant. Though I wasn't in the mood for anything too close or personal, leaving the house felt like the right choice. Barbara's presence and her undeniable charm made the idea of dining out far more appealing than staying home alone. As we arrived, I saw Nicole's car parked outside. The sight of it hit me harder than I expected. I'd always thought it was tacky how she decorated her Mustang with OBX and Jersey Shore stickers, but now it just felt like a painful reminder of everything that had gone wrong. In a split-second decision, I did something I wouldn't usually do. Instead of suggesting we eat elsewhere, I wrapped my arm around Barbara and guided her inside without a word. I made a quick arrangement with the host to seat us at a table that was somewhat secluded, but still had a view of the restrooms. I positioned Barbara with her back to the room and took a seat beside her. She smiled when I took her hand. Her curiosity piqued by the sudden change in behavior. Barbara teased me, asking what prompted the shift. I explained the situation, mentioning that Nicole's car outside was a reminder of my wife's betrayal, particularly with Nicole herself. Barbara burst out laughing, clearly finding the irony amusing. She teased me further, calling herself the other woman, and leaned in to give me a soft, lingering kiss, gentle but promising something more. The food arrived, and for the first time in days, I was actually enjoying myself. As I sat there with Barbara, the weight of my situation seemed to fade into the background. Her sharp humor had me laughing harder than I had in a long time. She had an uncanny way of making even accounting sound scandalous. During our conversation, I spotted Nicole walking by, and I pointed her out to Barbara. Barbara's reaction was instant. A playful grin spread across her face as she leaned in to kiss me again. My hand moved beneath the table, grazing her leg. Her skin was soft, but there was a firmness to her muscles that caught my attention. The sensation was electric. I could feel the heat of her body as my hand drifted, guided by a mix of instinct and desire. But before the moment could deepen, Nicole's loud voice cut through the air. She demanded to know what I was doing, her voice full of disbelief and anger. Her words carried, and I was sure the entire restaurant heard her. I pulled away from Barbara and turned to face Nicole. I shrugged off her harsh tone, replying that I was simply enjoying some time before Ashley and I settled down to start a family. I told her to lower her voice as people were still eating. Nicole stared, stunned by my response. I explained that Ashley had been doing the same thing, cheating for months, probably with her boss, and that I figured it was only fair to have some fun with the boss's daughter. Nicole looked like she might faint, and Barbara started to laugh. I squeezed her hand to quiet her, but I forgot where my hand was, and her laugh quickly morphed into a soft, pleased moan. Nicole stammered, asking if I knew about Ashley's affairs. I smirked and told her I was supposed to be the clueless, loyal husband, while Ashley had her fun with someone I thought was a good friend. I dropped the truth with a bitter edge, and Nicole flinched as the words hit their mark. I added that if Ashley could have her fling before we settled down, why was Nicole upset about my actions? Nicole looked horrified, and I could see her breaking inside. It was then that I pushed further, asking if she knew about Ashley's previous affair before we got married. I guessed that she might be rattled enough to confirm what I had suspected all along. She didn't disappoint. Her shock was evident as she asked if I knew about it, and I casually replied, "Not until now, but thanks for confirming." Nicole's face drained of color. I told her to leave. Without a word, she got up and stormed out of the restaurant, her departure followed by the sound of her car engine starting. Barbara let out a chuckle, her amusement clear. She mentioned she had hoped Nicole would stick around longer, and I couldn't help but smile. She also pointed out that Nicole was likely already calling Ashley, and I agreed, predicting that my phone would ring in just a few minutes. I estimated it would take Ashley hours to drive back from Pittsburgh, which meant we had plenty of time for dessert. I told Barbara I wouldn't be able to see her in the bikini she'd promised, but she laughed, saying we could definitely reschedule. With a flirtatious smile, Barbara leaned in, whispering that her semester would end soon and that she had always wanted to visit Austin. Before I could respond, her lips were on my ear, sending a wave of heat through me. Things went south quickly after that. Ashley started calling barely 10 minutes after Nicole had left the restaurant. I listened to her voicemails, each one angrier and more frantic than the last. It almost made me laugh, but I couldn't bring myself to. After an hour of her constant messages and texts, I decided to block her number. I knew she'd try to reach me from a different phone, but with her driving back from Pittsburgh, it wouldn't be easy. I packed up my things, not just the essentials for Austin, but everything I owned, and left my house. I wasn't sure when or if I'd ever return. A hotel near the Philly airport became my temporary base while I arranged for my belongings to go into storage and searched for a new place. Barbara and I stayed in touch. She was staying with a friend, trying to dodge her father's angry calls. I moved my flight to Austin up a day and left Monday morning, eager to put some distance between me and everything that had unraveled in my life. Ashley's calls kept coming, this time from different numbers. Her messages ranged from tearful pleas to accusations of ruining her career. Nicole's outburst had caused a stir, and someone had posted a detailed account on a blog, identifying Barbara and me as the key players in the drama. The mention of Ashley's affair with Paul was included, along with the fact that they had spent the weekend together in Pittsburgh. The local political scene was buzzing, and I could already feel the fallout coming. I avoided the Philly news for the rest of the week, but by Friday, I received an email from Margaret, a senior manager at the DA's office in Doylestown. She expressed her apologies for the chaos, admitting that she knew Paul was seeing two women outside the office but was unaware of Ashley's involvement. She also gave me credit for using legal means to get back at a lawyer. It seemed things were only beginning to unravel. Margaret updated me that Paul had been at the DA's office on Monday morning, attempting to minimize the damage and deny any responsibility for his actions. He claimed that his daughter's rebellion was simply a response to having a cheating husband. Then, on Tuesday, Ashley received divorce papers, citing adultery. The envelope included photographs, DVDs, and a letter from me. Upon reading my note, Ashley's horrified scream echoed through the office, and within moments, Margaret and two others rushed in. Ashley sat there, stunned, her body slumped in the chair. Margaret, glancing at the photos scattered across the desk, could only watch in silence. My letter explained that I hadn't had an affair, but I could no longer stay married to someone I didn't trust. especially after discovering her past infidelities. The DA's office saw little productivity that day. The next day, as Margaret was in Paul's office for a meeting, four men in suits suddenly walked in. Paul yelled at them for interrupting, but one of the men calmly informed him he was under arrest. Margaret later said Paul was completely stunned when they handcuffed him and let him out of the office. The scene outside was chaotic as they paraded him through the courthouse, passing reporters who had clearly gotten wind of the arrest. I owed Gary a drink for that. In her email, Margaret apologized for the disruption in the office and offered her help, saying I didn't deserve to be caught up in such a mess. While part of her message was no doubt an attempt to manage the fallout, I believed Margaret had remained the principled and professional person I had always respected. My attempt at a quiet divorce was ruined by a reckless, impulsive decision I made at the restaurant with Nicole. The media picked up on Paul's arrest immediately, and the charges against him became a sensational story. As I had told Ashley, this whole affair was like something out of a summer thriller. Lies, betrayal, revenge, and drama. News outlets devoured it, and it was quickly broadcast across 24-hour networks. Since I was out of town, I managed to avoid the worst of it. Reporters hadn't tracked me down yet, as I'd checked into a second hotel 10 miles away from my work itinerary's listed location. Though I was relatively safe, I couldn't avoid the fact that reporters were still camped outside my house, waiting for a glimpse of me. Since Ashley wasn't leaving, they focused on her family instead. Barbara had it the hardest, being branded as the daughter who turned in her own father. Despite her exams, the media found her quickly, and it became impossible for her to stay out of the spotlight. The school eventually intervened, removing reporters from campus after they caused too much disruption. It also helped when the two women who had children with Paul came forward, seeking their moment of fame. Once Barbara finished her final exam, she quietly left campus, heading straight for the airport. The media was disappointed but unsurprised when she didn't attend the graduation ceremony. As time passed, the story became a background topic for the press. It resurfaced when Paul's trial began, but he pled guilty to multiple charges, resulting in a 20-year federal sentence. Fortunately, his guilty plea spared Barbara and me from the need to testify. After that, the media moved on, and the public shifted their attention away from all of us. Surprisingly, despite all the media attention, my divorce moved forward with minimal resistance. Ashley signed the papers just 4 days after receiving them. In her letter, she apologized for everything that had happened between us. Though she was furious at first and swore she would never forgive me for my infidelity, the reality that she was the only one who had been unfaithful made her realize the hypocrisy of her anger. She accepted the 50-50th split offer and expressed a desire to meet in person to apologize when the time felt right. She ended her letter with a note saying she would always love me and wished me the best. I later learned from her mother that Ashley had left her job and moved to the Midwest to live with an aunt. Bringing Paul down had a positive impact on my career. The FBI publicly credited me with uncovering key details in Paul's records, and while I kept a low profile, I poured my energy into the Austin case. Not only did I help uncover the embezzler they were after, but I also identified a second, previously unknown suspect. My firm recognized my hard work by promoting me to lead a team dedicated to white-collar crime. Someone even jokingly dubbed the group Hogan's Heroes. The cherry on top was getting an assistant, a recent college grad eager to get into forensic accounting. Having her around made the late nights more enjoyable, and of course seeing her swimsuit lying on my hotel room floor didn't hurt either. After everything that had unfolded, I felt a mixture of relief and unease. The pieces of my life had shifted, and I was left standing amidst the ruins of what once seemed so stable. My marriage to Ashley, which had once been filled with dreams of children and shared futures, was now nothing more than a shattered illusion. But life, as it often does, moved forward. The truth had surfaced, and with it, the weight of what had been hidden for so long. I couldn't deny the sense of freedom that came with the end of that chapter. The burden I had carried for so long, the weight of betrayal and deceit, had been lifted, even though it had taken a scandal of this magnitude to bring it to light. My work, which had always been my escape, had been a constant source of strength throughout this turmoil. The promotion at the firm felt like a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it was a reminder that my career, my own integrity, was something that no one could take away from me. The FBI's recognition, though unexpected, only added to the growing sense that I was reclaiming control over my life. But there was no denying that things had changed. I had become someone who had been tested in ways I never imagined. I'd learned about betrayal not just in the sense of a marriage, but in the way the world around me could deceive and disguise itself. Paul Evans, the once pristine political figure, was now behind bars, a cautionary tale of how power could corrupt. Barbara, too, had taken her own stand, choosing to help me expose the man who had shaped her life so ruthlessly. Yet, even as the dust settled, I couldn't help but feel a lingering question: what had I become in this process? I had started as a man with a simple desire for a family, for stability. But now I was something else. Someone who had been pushed to the edge, forced to confront the darkness in the people closest to me. In a way, Barbara's presence in my life became a strange comfort. She was the embodiment of a life I didn't plan for. One where passion and betrayal intertwined, where everything seemed to be on the edge of unraveling at any given moment. And yet, through it all, we had both managed to find a strange kind of clarity in each other. We had witnessed the fall of two powerful figures, Ashley and Paul, and in doing so, we had discovered something we could never have expected: a bond forged in the flames of our shared betrayal. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe I would go to Austin and find the peace I so desperately needed. Maybe the media attention would die down, and I could finally put my past behind me. But a part of me realized that I would never be the same person again. The experiences I'd lived through, of discovery, of heartbreak, of revenge, had left their mark on me, reshaping who I was. As I looked ahead, I realized that it wasn't just about surviving the storm. It was about learning to live with the changes it brought. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. No longer tied to the past, I would move forward, not as a man broken by betrayal, but as one who had been reborn from it.